Anyway, so language. So what we did last time was starting. Okay, so the starting point is communication is pervasive in nature. Right? Everything communicates with everything. I had maybe only 2 slides. I took it for granted. Everything communicates. There's chemicals that fly around all the time, whether it's pollen, water, sound waves, whatever. So communication is pervasive. There's nothing mysterious about 2 living beings communicating. There's a number of things that are weird about human language. So the first one is that in most cases, especially in France, it's just a continuous flow of sound. This is what your brain hears, okay? But we are amazingly good at finding out where a word stops and the next one begins. That's not trivial, okay? So that puzzled a lot of people, puzzled Chomsky. Chomsky came up with the idea that and some other considerations, that our brains are predisposed. They are programmed to learn a language. They know that there's a pause somewhere there that is not visible, but it's meaningful. They know how to disassemble that okay? And so he came up with the idea of the universal grammar. And different people have different opinions, but to this day, very contemporary scholar like Steven Pinker calls it language instinct. Call it whatever you want to call it. There's that school of thought that says we are born to speak. Okay? It's the brain wants to speak, it will speak. It's just a question of deciding which language. Now, one thing that is weird is that we have different languages, widely different languages. I cannot understand some dialects of my own country. Another thing that is weird, that probably comes from that, is that the human language is incredibly combinatorial. It's not like, so we still have the same language that animals have, the same form of communication, the scream, the smile. Anywhere in the world you go, you smile, people understand the smile. And it's instantaneous. But we are also capable of using sound and combining them in all possible manners. And that's something that no other species does. Wars, it gets worse. Not only we created these extremely complicated sentences, books and speeches and so on, but we also use things like ambiguous things, like I. What does I mean? Well, it depends who says it. If I say it, it means Pierre. If Jim says it, it means Jim. Today, depends which day you say it. And then, of course, there's a lot of words. And every language has words that have 2 meanings, depending which sentence they are. And then a metaphor. We use metaphors all the time. There's a traffic jam. It's not literal. In fact, I think I told you, fairy tales are lies. Everything there is not true. But we tell them to children, at least to get them used to the idea that that's what comes next in life. So anyway, so at some point I think I emphasized that there are people who think language does more than communication. The language is not just communication, and maybe it was not born for communication. Different linguists, biologists, philosophers have different ideas. But one idea is the Sapir-Whorf theory: language shapes thought, thought shapes language. It's a lot more than communication. When you teach your child English, you are transferring an entire culture, which is different from teaching Japanese. Okay, so that's a lot. There's a lot of baggage that comes with that grammar, with that vocabulary, and so on. Another theory, cementing the group. I think I told you, my mom was telling me in the old days you could tell from which village somebody comes simply by listening to the dialect. Each village has a slightly different dialect, different words, expressions, and so on. Yes.
And we still have that today, even in English. I mean, you can listen to somebody talk and say, oh, obviously he's from marketing.
Right.
Obviously, he's from IT.
Not all of it, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so anyway, Jeffrey Miller thinks it was part of the thing about sexual selection, that he says we are much better speakers than listeners, alas. We are great at telling stories, we're not that good at listening to other people. And that's not just a joke, it's the way it is. Human beings are extremely good at speaking. And he said, it looks like it's kind of pointless. There's a point where we overdo the same way that the peacock overdoes when it opens the tail. Okay, the tail is actually a sexual display. So Jeffrey Miller said, maybe, so if you speak a lot, you should tell your partner, don't complain, it's for you. Okay? So it could be that it helped with sex selection. Susan Langler, one of the most underrated philosophers of this country ever, said that language might be just a side effect. We are symbolic animals. So a lot of people agree with this today. Our brain likes symbols, and we work with symbols all the time. We produce symbols and so on. And one of my favorite things, paraphrasing, but humans dance around the fire to bring rain. That's how senseless is that? How many animals would dance around the fire hoping to get rain? So we do amazing things. I don't want to get into religion. I'm not religious, so. But I could pick on my own religion, which believes that there is a supernatural being that you cannot see, and then there's a guy in Rome who has direct access, and then he talks to some other guys, there's a hierarchy of guys, and all of them have some kind of supernatural power that can confess you and do all sorts of things. And every Sunday morning you're supposed to go to a building and say some things. I can go on, right? I mean, any animal that stares at us when we do these things would just go. Right? So Langler said our brain is built to create these huge symbolic systems. How do we manage these huge symbolic systems? Language. So language will be a side effect of the fact that we build these amazing constructs, symbols. Then I told you the language we can study at different levels. So phonetics is the one that nobody talks about because it's the most difficult. It's very engineering level, and it's the sound signal. The fact that right now a machine would detect this, and then good luck figuring out what that is. Then the syntax, that has to do with the verb, the noun, how you can organize things, and each language has rules. Okay, in German you put the verb at the end. In English it would sound really, really funny if you put the verb at the end. So each language has its own syntax. And then the semantics. Out of these sentences we get a meaning. Piero ate the apple, and the apple was eaten by Piero at the same meaning, but they're totally different. And then there's pragmatics. At the end of the day, whether I said Piero ate the apple or the apple was eaten by Piero, I'm trying to do something with language. Easiest example is, do you know what time it is? You don't expect a yes, no. The guy has to understand that you actually want to know what time it is. And I think I told you that last week, what was it? The library, I asked somebody, where's the library? Was it the library, post office? Maybe the post office.
Mm-hmm.
So where's the post? Do you know where's the post office? And the answer was, it's closed. Okay? Pragmatics. He understood that the intention was, I want to go to the post office to do something. No, I just had a meeting across the street. So pragmatics is what we do with language. So language is one mind-boggling faculty, or the cognitive faculties we have. It's one of the most puzzling. And it could be that it's not just for communication. That's an important message. Okay? Okay, then last time we also did dreams and emotion briefly, because tonight we also have a lot of territory to cover. So dreams, REM sleep, right? I think at the end I told you that there's already an exception to every rule. Now it sounds like you can also dream when you are not in REM sleep, but that would be still a very. The general rule is REM sleep is when dreams happen. Now, first of all, as Jouvet said already in the 60s, rats have REM sleep. So he said whatever REM sleep does, it has to be the same for humans and rats. Well, that's not necessarily a logical conclusion, but that's a plausible idea. And then many hypotheses have come out about what dreams do, and I think today that we know more about the brain, there's one that is winning. But I will mention two. One was the sentinel hypothesis. Most mammals and birds, when they have REM sleep. So REM sleep, as far as I know, is only mammals and birds. When I say animals, you should stop me and ask me, but generally speaking, warm-blooded animals are different from the others. That's a general rule. Okay, something happens, and there's also some neuroscientists who think that the brain's main job is actually temperature regulation, which happens in hypothalamus, which is important for many other reasons. But anyway, so birds and mammals, they also have REM sleep, and but they also wake up. Some species of the cat wakes up a little bit. So the sentinel hypothesis is that during REM sleep is actually a way to wake up the animal and check that everything's okay and go back to sleep. The other hypothesis, this has become a much bigger school of thought, is the cognitive hypothesis, that actually dreams are extremely important to consolidate your memories. And at the end of the day, I mean, as you probably remember, there were slightly different variations of this. You remember what is essential, you forget what is not essential, whichever way you want to put it. But something happens when you sleep. You're processing what you learned, basically, and you decide, and your brain decides what stays, what doesn't stay. And there's a part of the brain that makes sense of what goes on in the world, and that part of the brain right now is getting input from your senses, and the output is movement. And when you sleep, that part of the brain is getting input from thalamus directly, whatever, and the cortex. And it's like a short circuit inside the brain. And then so that part of the brain is seeing all these images that you are processing, is trying to make sense of it, and that's the dream. Okay. Then we talk a little bit about emotion. So emotion is a form of universal language. So it could have a communication purpose. But then I also showed that the so-called high road, low road. There's two ways that the brain decides what to do. If I notice a rock is falling, something is falling, I don't spend a lot of time analyzing, trying to figure out what is that, what would be the impact of that thing on my head, and so on and so on. I jump, right? That's the low road. So in that case, the short circuit, it goes straight from the input through the thalamus directly to amygdala, that gives the feeling of fear directly down to the brainstem act. Okay? The high road instead goes through the cortex, and the cortex is this big thing that has all the memory, probably all the concept, probably all the theories about things. Once I jumped, I can look at the thing and realize, oh, there was just a balloon. It would have done nothing. Okay. The time that it takes is very different. So emotion could also be, besides communication between two people, but internally, it's something that helps me make a decision right away. Okay? If that had been a rock, I would be dead. So the fact that the emotion made me jump was useful for avoiding the long, I mean, it replaces reasoning. It's faster. It's not as accurate, but it's faster.